for this wonderful time God has given to my life. uh, Dear Pastor, uh, brothers and sisters, young children, greetings to you all in the matchless name of Jesus Christ. Jeff and Jimmy, Angela, it was a nice time of worship. And all the Sunday school children and youths, it was a wonderful time of prayer. And again, God is keeping us safe this moment. And we're really thankful to God the way that God has been helping us, helping our province, helping our country, helping the world to going through the moment of this crisis. Today, I would like to speak about Habakkuk. It's not an exegetical sermon. It's just I just would like to talk about Habakkuk. Shall we turn our Bible, the book of Habakkuk? I'm not preaching from a particular passage or verse, just talking basically about Habakkuk. As we see, when we go through the Old Testament minor prophets, the book of Habakkuk is a small book. It contains only 3 chapters. That's a small book in the Old Testament. And Habakkuk is a man who was a contemporary of Jeremiah. And the name of Habakkuk means the one who embraced God, the one who embraced God. So that's what a meaningful name, the one who embraced God. We know all through this book, when we start to read, we can see obviously that's a perfect name for Habakkuk, because all through this book, Habakkuk always wants to embrace God, even at the moment of any crisis, any tribulation. He faced a lot of crisis at that moment, but still he wanted to embrace God at the time of crisis. Little historical background regarding this book. We know the king Josiah was a man who followed God, and the king who followed the God's will. And when we read 2 Kings chapter 23 verse 28 to 30, when we read that, we see what happened in the life of King Josiah. When Josiah was ruling, Judah, the land Judah has a lot of peace. The Judea had a lot of peace and they were peaceful. But what happened? King Josiah died, then everything turns upside down. Then another king overtook the rule. His name is Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim was a king who was a follower of one of the Egyptian king, and he was a vassal of Egyptian king. Then the moment he took over the rule, the situation in Judea started to change. Everything started to change. They started to corruption, because every money that he's collecting from people, and he laid heavy taxes on people. The corruption started, and a lot of problems started, a lot of injustice, oppression of poor people, a lot of injustice happening in their land. The moment Jehoiakim took the rule, the things started to change in the life of people of Judea. A lot of corruption. This is the background where Habakkuk is coming and talking about God, to God about his people. We know this is a prayer. So chapter 1 to 3 is a prayer of Habakkuk. And we can see there are a lot of questions in chapter 1 he's asking. We can see a lot of why. And he's asking again, how long, Lord? Why, Lord? Why do you make me see iniquities and cause me to look into wickedness? And a lot of questions that he's asking in these 3 books. The whole book of Habakkuk is a journey of faith. Isn't that our life too? So we are traveling in this life. Our life is a journey. In our life, many ups and downs comes. As a young people, when you're going to the school, when you go to college, when you're taking up your school classes and courses, you'll have a lot of ups and downs, right? So when a lot of pitfalls wait for you, a lot of traps, many dangers, it will come into our life as a part of this journey. Habakkuk, that we can see that we cannot always change our circumstances, that we cannot always control our circumstances. But one thing Habakkuk tells us, we can do one thing, that we can change our attitude towards them. Habakkuk is seeing a God at this moment, though he's asking a lot of why question at chapter 1. Still, he's mentioning there the God is not missing from there. The God is still there. It's same with our life. The moment comes to our life, we have a lot of why questions. We have a lot of questions towards God. God, why it's happening to my life? Lord, how long it takes to answer my prayers? These are the questions that we are always ask to God. But at the same time, here Habakkuk tells us God still is there. God presence still there. God is there. God doesn't leave it to anywhere. God still listen to our prayers. God still listen to our why questions. God still listen to our complaints. God still listen to our murmurs before Him. So there's a wonderful book written by a person called Harold S. Kushner. The title of his book was When Bad Things Happen to Good People. That's the title of the book. When Bad Things Happen to the Good People. So this author, it was a personal family tragedy and calamity that he went through. His son Aaron was sick. A sickness called progeria got affected, rapid aging. The sad news of the illness was difficult for him to handle. He knew he was trying his best to live a good and committed life as a Christian. And more still, if God existed, if God were fair, just loving and forgiving, how could he allow his son to fall in sick, causing pain and anguish to the entire family? Kushner's questions is old as a biblical Habakkuk and Job. That's the same question here, Habakkuk and Job. We can see they're asking the same question, why God is allowing the just people to suffer. Why God is allowing the just people to go through a lot of difficulties in their life. That's the same question Job and Habakkuk is asking when we read their books. We know there's another tennis superstar. His name is Arthur Ashe. He was one of the Wimbledon champion. He died of AIDS. During a heart surgery, he contracted with AIDS, the blood transfusion, that's what happening. So he contracted AIDS because of that. Ashe, his life was totally devastated when he came to know that he contracted with AIDS, that he was about to die. Then he mentioned this way. He explained, if I ask, why me about my troubles? I would have to ask, why me about my blessing too? So at times that, including me, we always ask God, why it's happening to my life? And here Ashe would tell us, if we ask God always why about our troubles, we should have also ask God, why about my blessing? And he mentioned, why am I winning Wimbledon? Why am I marrying a beautiful and gifted woman? Why I got a wonderful children? If I ask God why I got this illness, that was the answer that Ashe was giving there. At the same time, we have a lot of blessing that God has given to us in our life. As I mentioned before, last sermon, I think Jesus was on the cross. He said, Father, why have you forsaken me? Jesus, even at the cross, asked the same question. Why have you forsaken me? That's a question Jesus asked on the cross. It's a universal answer for all our prayers. When we ask why to God, even Jesus was on the cross, asked the same question to his Father. Why have you forsaken me? Habakkuk cries out here in Habakkuk chapter 1 to 2, for when we read, he's asking a lot of questions. And he's telling verse 4, so the law is slack and justice never goes forth, for the wicked surround the righteousness. So justice goes forth perverted. Here he's telling the justice is going out of the land. The justice are the people who are doing justice suffering. The wicked are winning the land. That's the question here. Habakkuk was asking to God. The other prophet, Amos, he warned the northern kingdom. That time there was a northern kingdom of Judea and southern kingdom of Judea. Amos warned the northern kingdom of Judea about their injustice, about their sin. So he warned the people, In 722 BC, Assyria swept the northern kingdom away. The Assyria conquered the northern kingdom away. Everybody, most of the people got killed in northern kingdom of Judea. Now here the same situation, the southern kingdom of Judea is facing the same problem. After 130 years, they offended the same thing, they committing the same offense, they committing the same crime before God, they had learned nothing. That's where Habakkuk is coming up and talking to God about this problem. When we see our society today, we have the same feeling comes to our mind, right? As young people especially, right? When we are trying to follow God, at the same time, we know some of our friends, some of our college mates or schoolmates, they walk the way they wanted, right? They walk they doesn't care anything. So we see those kind of people. The same question comes to our mind. So the biggest enemy of church today is the humanism, right? There's so much focus on humanism. So more into relativism, we say, where human decisions are at the core. We say we live in a similar society where we say we are the owners of our life. I've seen many years back, like when I was in India, I happened to see kids are talking to their parents, Dad and Mom, I am the owner of my life. Please don't question me about my life. I don't need your advice. I don't need your suggestions. I am the owner of my life. And I know it happens to our life especially when we become like a teenager. When we reach that age, we'll try to learn about a lot of things about the world. We start to read about a lot of books. We have a lot of ideas comes to our brain. Then the normal question that comes to our mind is, okay, I am in control of myself. I can make decisions. I am the owner of my life. And we know in a church in New York, they spend almost like $100,000 for the security purpose. 1 in 5 teens in US takes weapon to school. Knives and razor blades preferred by 55% of the US kids. And they prefer, 24% of the kids prefer the nightclubs, and guns by 21% of the people. We have young people doesn't care about the life, and they don't have any purpose in the life. As I mentioned before, there's a famous student in Yale University committed suicide years back, and his father came and met the journalist, and he mentioned, my son committed suicide because he doesn't find meaning in his life. So we are meeting a lot of young people who have the same motto in their life. It is my life, and I am the owner of my life, and nobody can control my life. It's all good. We can take ownership of our life, but remember always, when we reach to certain pitfalls in our life, when we reach to certain valleys in our life wouldn't be the same always. We have success now. We have a lot of ideas in our brain now. We have a lot of victories now, but our life doesn't seem to be same always. When we reach to certain situations in our life, are we still owner of our life? We cannot. We cannot. We cannot one point manage our life. We need God as our owner to our life. We cannot be owners of our life all the time. I remember years back when I was listening to one of the radio program, I just heard about the super tennis star Boris Becker. He was a 3 times Wimbledon champion, and he was on the top of the world. He earned millions of dollars and millions of dollars. But he mentioned one time, in my life, I always struggle with the thoughts of suicide. That's what he told at the end of his career. He said, I had Wimbledon 3 times before. When I was the youngest player, I was rich. I had material possessions, but I always struggled with these thoughts of suicide. All these material blessings, all this worldly fame, all this worldly fames, everything would not take us anywhere. We need God as honor to our life. What are we really missing in our life sometime? We are missing the relationship with our God. I know personally me, all of us, sometimes we lose our connection with God. We backslide from his presence. Everybody does in their life. But at the same time, we always have to come back and say, God, I'm coming back to your presence now. Take me to your throne now. Help me to keep back the relationship with you now. So that's what we can see. The same thing we can see in the book of Habakkuk. He comes with a lot of questions, but we can see Habakkuk never ever lose his trust with God. He still keep the devotion with God always. He's not complaining out of his devotion. He keeps his devotion, and he started to ask a lot of questions to the Lord. So that's a present generation that we live in. There's a word within Yiddish language. The Yiddish language is a language, simply a concussion of language between Hebrew and German. So some people in Europe talk this Yiddish language. So it was a slang especially they speak in the slums. So there's a one word in Yiddish, within Yiddish language, it's just word, it sounds shupsa. So the linguistic cannot find a proper English word for this word shupsa, but they say a classic example for this word. Shupsa is like a young man who murdered his parents and go to the court and ask the court to show mercy because he's an orphan now. That's the word shupsa just means. So our younger generation now pretty much same. It's like a shupsa. So we live in a modern world. We live in a world that young people or the young generation, it means the same. After killing the parents, they go to the court and say, please pardon me because I am an orphan. So that's a world, my brothers and sisters, that we are living. And we need our God to take complete ownership of our life. So Habakkuk, we can see in chapter 1 to 5 to 11, he was saying, God, why are you silent? You see all the injustice happening in this world. You see all the people are struggling. All the poor, innocent people are struggling. All the just people are struggling. And why are you, Lord, silent? And Habakkuk asking a lot of questions to God. And God is not answering any of his questions at the beginning. God was very silent. It's happening to our life. Many times we ask many questions to God. We have a lot of doubts. We have a lot of questions. We ask to God, but God still remains silent. And we ask God, why? God, you are so silent. When I ask you many questions, why are you silent? That's what we tell God all the time. Why, God, are you silent? But at the same time, we need to realize one thing. God has a permissive will in our life. That's a one beautiful word. God has a permissive will in our life. I was reading one of the books before, and the author name was Weatherhead. So he wrote a book. He brought the idea. I don't know how many of you would agree with that idea. He brought this idea. God has three wills. He said God has an intentional will. Then he said intentional will can be seen in the Garden of Eden, where there was a peace and harmony. There was a life and no death. There was a personal relationship between God and God's human creations. Adam and Eve used to walk with God and fellowship in the Garden of Eden. God provided everything that humanity needed to thrive physically, emotionally, intellectually, and whatever means. This is the intentional will of God. And he comes again and say another will of God, that is a permissive will of God. He say God has a permissive will. Especially now, God has a permissive will because it is not what God wanted, but humanity had to be permitted to make their own choices. So when a teenager decides to drink and drive and kill someone, that is not God's intentional will, but it has become God's permissive will. God had to let the teenager make the fateful choice, or the teenager would no longer have free will. So that's a free permissive will of God. And there's a third will, that's the ultimate will of God. We can read the last 2 chapters of Bible to see that. The new heaven and new earth, I believe, will just be like Garden of Eden with a lot more people. God's ultimate will is that we spend an eternity with him. So right now we have the permissive will of God. So everything happening in our life according to the permissive will of God, though we have many questions, though we have many doubts, at the end of the day, we need to realize it is God's permissive will. God's perfect will. That's what we can see. God doesn't answer Habakkuk certain time because God knows his will, the perfect will needs to happen. And after a long prayer here, Habakkuk was praying and he started getting answer. Once he started getting answer, Habakkuk was so thrilled and he got excited. And he thought, okay, now God is going to revive the people. Now God is going to help the people. Now God is going to do some miracles for the people, but not really. God started to answer very differently. We can see when we start to read chapter 1, God is telling him, I'm going to send Chaldeans to attack Judea now. So the biggest judgment is coming upon Judea now. Habakkuk thought God is going to send some miracles now, but rather God is telling Habakkuk, Chaldeans is going to attack Judea now. A judgment, a doom day is going to happen on Judea. He was so disappointed. He was so disappointed because he expected something from God and God is answering a different thing to him now. So the Chaldeans are these savage people. They kill people without any mercy. And everybody knows that. The Babylonians, the Nebuchadnezzar, we know the story. They kill people without any mercy. They invade city. They burn alive people. They commit a lot of crimes in the places they're conquering. That's a barbarian. Babylonians are coming to attack the country now. That's a message he received from God. So yet God is also telling Habakkuk, at the same time, I'm going to judge Babylon too. I'm going to judge Babylon too. You know what happened to Babylon? After years, many years, Babylon fell down. The great country fell down. Nebuchadnezzar got killed. Now we know Babylon. Many of you know that Iraq is the modern Babylon, right? Now we know what's the situation of Iraq. That's what happened to Babylon. So the Habakkuk was prophesied, the prophet was prophesied, whatever he prophesied came to pass. Everything came to pass. The judgment came upon Judea. At the same time, the judgment came upon Babylon. That's the word of God came to pass. So at all these problems, Habakkuk never lost his devotion. He's lost in touch with his God. He kept his ultimate devotion with God. You know what? Each time Habakkuk kept the devotion, though he asked many questions, he kept the devotion. God each time transcended him to the higher level. Each time God transcended him at a higher level. That's what when we come to the chapter 2, we can see everything start to change. Chapter 1, he was asking Lord of why Lord, how long? But when come to chapter 2, he got a perfect answer from God. He understood what's the perfect will of God. In chapter 2, verse 4, he's saying, behold, as a proud one, his soul no right within him, but the righteous shall live by faith. But the righteous shall live by faith. God is telling Habakkuk, you face a lot of injustice in your life. You have seen a lot of injustice in your life. A lot of people in your life doing injustice. But God promised one thing to Habakkuk. If you cling on to the faith, if you still serve me, if you're still a faithful servant, that I can promise you one thing. My justice will sustain you. The just shall live by faith. Whatever happening around us, whatever happening around your life, nothing gonna affect you. Nothing gonna take you away from the presence of God, because God will keep his just, and his just shall live by faith. That's what we can see in the book of epistles. Paul was writing in Galatians and Hebrews, and those books Paul was writing, my just shall live by faith. That's what great reformers like Calvin and Martin Luther say. Habakkuk is the grandfather of the Reformation, because he's the first person mentioned this word, the just shall live by faith. The just shall live by faith. I end the sermon pretty soon in 2 minutes. We see here chapter 2 verse 8, behold for the proud one. The moment we are proud about something in our life, the moment we think our education, our positions, our job, or our knowledge, anything that we feel proud about it. Thing is always, God doesn't like that one thing in our life, the proud moments. Rather, if you are a just person, if you are devoted to God, God would always love that part in our life. And when we come down to chapter 3, we can see everything start to change in his life. Now, chapter 3 is a song. Chapter 3 is a wonderful poem. Chapter 3, if you can read the chapter 3, it's a wonderful, beautiful poem Habakkuk was writing. And he realized God is in control of everything. God is in control of everything. It's a song of exaltation. And in chapter 3, verse 17, we can see he's telling, I have lost everything. He said, I have lost everything. All the crops, everything I've lost. Judea lost everything. They have 3 items. They have 3 crops, figs, grapes, and olive. And they have next items in the field like animal crops. Then they have a flock and cattle. They lost everything through the battles. But at the verse 18, he's telling, yet I will rejoice. Yet I will exalt in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. He was telling, even though I lose everything in my life, even though I lose every crops, every cattle, every field, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. And in verse 19, he's telling, chapter 3, verse 19, for God led me here. And he's telling the Lord, God is my strength. And he has made my feet like the feet of a deer and makes me walk on my higher places. You know how much God helped Habakkuk since he kept the devotion with God. From chapter 1, from the desperation, a lot of white question. Then slowly God is helping him to chapter 2, understand him, the permissive will of God, the perfect will of God. Though you face everything in your life, the just shall live by faith. And chapter 3, and he's singing and he's exhorting God in his life. A.W. Tozer, he was a famous preacher. And I read a story about him. He bought a rug for $2. And he kept the rug in his living room. And from morning 8 to 12 o'clock, he always lay down on this rug. And he lay down on the rug, bow down before God. And he say, I doesn't utter a word. I doesn't say anything. I don't know. I don't ask God, God help me, God bless me. I don't ask anything to God. I just bow down before God. I don't ask anything. I just submit myself to the permissive will of God. I said, God, here I am. That's the only thing I can do. Just bow down a couple of hours before you. He doesn't worship. He doesn't utter a lot of sounds. He doesn't clamor. He doesn't do anything. Just bow down before God. This is what Habakkuk does. He kept that perfect devotion to God, and God took him to the higher level. God took him to the another level, showed him the permissive will of God, what's the perfect will of God. And he's totally satisfied. He's totally satisfied what God came with. That's what end of the day, he's saying, yet I will rejoice you, Lord. Yet I will rejoice you, Lord. The beautiful song that we sing often. How we trials and temptation. Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Can we find a friend so faithful, who will all our sorrow share? Jesus knows every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. My dear friends, we know we have sometimes friends in our life, but nobody can answer questions sometime in our life. Nobody can answer sometime the why question we have. When we face a lot of challenges, none of our friends can answer the why question that we always ask God, like Habakkuk. But if you remain a trustworthy person to God, a just person to God, and if we keep our devotion to God like Habakkuk, at the end of the day, God will help us to say, yet I will rejoice in the Lord, even though I face any crisis in my life. Young brothers and sisters, keep this God as your honor in your life. He is the only honor in your life, nobody else. That you don't need to take ownership of your life. Let God take ownership of your life, and He will sustain you all your life. Whenever you face any troubles and temptations, any problems in your life, that God will be the honor of your life. At the end, you can come and say, "Yet I will rejoice in Lord." May God bless you.
Thank you, Brother Solomon, for that blessed message.